afternoon, wherever you are. Today, we're going to talk about how money makes the world go round, the hard truths of it. Today, I'm joined with Luke Dillon, based in the UK. Well, today he's in the UK, sometimes he's in South Africa. But he and I are going to talk about the hard truths of business. So let's talk about some of the harsh realities of business. Let's talk about the entrepreneurial ventures and, where everybody thinks that these lead to immense riches. Let's be honest, they don't. Some of the gross margins of small businesses are in the single digits. Their biggest wealth comes at the exit of their business. Let that sink in for a moment. Most business owners in small businesses have margins that are in single digits, and their wealth is when they exit. But only 1 in 11 businesses in the US sell at the end of their term. In the UK, that number is 1 in 15. Right? There's some pretty harsh realities. 1 in 11 and 1 in 15 in the US and UK actually sell, and gross margins are single digits. So it's not all Lamborghinis out there. So today we're going to talk about some of those harsh realities. We're going to talk about some of the learnings that both Luke and I have had over the years of experience around running businesses. What does it mean? We're going to pull back the kimono this morning. So, morning, Luke. How are you doing today?
Hey, Andrew. Great to see you. Yeah, very good. Thanks. Coming from a not so sunny England, but great to be in the Northern Hemisphere again. And those are some frightening stats that you deliver there. And I imagine in South Africa that it's probably closer to 1 in 20 that sells successfully.
Yeah, that's pretty revealing, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, businesses have got two options, right? 1, sell. 2, close. Those are the only two options you've got.
Correct.
You're either going to sell your business or you're going to close your business, and that's it. Even if you're handing it down to your family members, right, you should always sell it. Why are you giving the nest egg? Why are you giving that away? Another frightening statistic, 90% of businesses that are handed down to the second generation fail. Another hard reality out there. So why would you give that business away that you've worked on to somebody that's going to fail? So again, we got to set up for success. With that in mind, let's start talking about some of the brutal truths about profitability, Luke. So Luke, can you share a time when your business was on a brink of financial collapse, and what was the wake-up call?
Yeah, Andrew, I've owned, closed, founded, bought more than 12 businesses on my journey. And the business that comes to mind was a home heating business that we had during COVID. It was retail, and obviously not being essential services, that business couldn't continue to operate. And it was quickly apparent that when we looked at the runway, there wouldn't be a business unless we made some quick decisions. So I think the key thing is operating profitability, your sales pipeline, and your cash flow forecast. Those were the things we looked at. We couldn't operate, obviously, because of the restrictions that were placed globally on retail businesses. So that became a huge challenge. And as a result, cash flow and all the overheads, a lot of the overheads were still there. So when we sat and we did a forward projection on sales and cash flow, we realized that we had to make some pretty quick changes. We did that quite quickly, fortunately, not knowing how long COVID would carry on, as no one did. But we made those adjustments quickly. We stripped out all the expenses we could. We took the business online as much as we could and managed to exit successfully. We had one big competitor in the market. They wanted that market share that we had actually stolen from them. So fortunately, having an exit strategy up front enabled us to exit early, albeit not at a price that we were looking for. But if we hadn't had that strategy and hadn't looked at cash flow and said, okay, well, could we survive another year? Then we definitely wouldn't have made the right decision, and we would have lost everything.
So basically you're saying that it was understanding the numbers, predicting the future through numbers,
Yeah.
got you to a decision point that you needed to get from A to B. And even getting to B, you had another set of numbers that said you needed to exit, right? So
Correct.
your strategy was to exit. As you said, it wasn't the numbers you wanted, but you exited in the right way and you didn't lose everything.
Yes, correct, Andrew. We exited, I suppose, in the right way for us at the
Mm-hmm.
time. It was a successful exit in the fact that it was an exit and it constituted a sale.
Right.
But looking at, the spreadsheets and, we all Excel millionaires when we set up our businesses and look at it. In reality, it was 10% of what we thought we'd get for that business had we been
Mm-hmm.
able to continue. So I think, like you were saying, what's important as a business owner, you've got to have that exit in mind. How are you going to exit? When are you going to exit? And what do you need from that business in order to exit and take the next step in your journey, or to retire, or do whatever you want to do? But that number and date are critical, I believe. And every
Okay.
client that I work with today, it's what's your exit strategy? When do you imagine that happening, and what is the value that we need to achieve in order for it to be a successful exit? Because like you were saying, most businesses operating on thin margins and the value isn't there. People have these unrealistic expectations of what they can sell their business for.
All right.
Andrew, I mean, from your side, have you ever pursued a project you were passionate about that simply didn't pay off? And how did you control that reality?
Yes. I've had many projects that we've run in my current business life and previous, corporate lives. One example I'm going to share with is marketing. So I pursued an aggressive marketing campaign, outsourced marketing, brought a organization into the business to revamp the marketing, right? Because every business needs to have new leads coming in. That's what marketing is. We did our due diligence on the company. There were specialists in the area. We did a lot of work with regards to getting the content and the knowledge correct. And then we launched. And we launched with a significant investment in this endeavor. And like all endeavors, right? Spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
Spreadsheets drove the numbers. So from a spreadsheet perspective, the numbers made sense. And like yourself, this was on the post COVID, but we were still in the COVID era. So we went for it and we pumped money into it. Again, we were looking for return on revenue. We understood that there was a period of time in when things needed to grow and evolve. You needed that growth time. We hit those numbers. And once we started to look at the numbers weren't showing what we were promised. Okay. We weren't getting the return on revenue. We were committed to the project. So we kept moving the project forward and kept moving the project forward. And at the end, the project did not deliver on the return on revenue anywhere close to what it should have done. This was all, contrary to all the data we'd seen before. It was contrary to all the statistics. It was contrary to the message that we had. Everything was revamped. It was all tried and tested. We were constantly A/B testing it. Even with the A/B testing it, we had the data coming in that said it was on the right direction. It just didn't deliver at the end of the day. And I would probably say we got it on life support at the end of the day. And for a business owner, doing cardiac arrest on your business on a project is extremely tiresome, right? You've got the financial challenge, you've got the emotional challenge, you've got the business challenge. So it was very tiring, and we got to the point where I lost belief in the program, and we lost belief in the numbers, and we had to cancel the project. And that was down at the end of the day to the numbers. And one of the things we do is we always do an after action report. What did we learn? What did we learn from the activity we just did? And we concluded that we should have terminated the project 4 months earlier. We were invested. We believed in it. We believe that, it's like when you're digging for gold, it's just one shovelful away, right? It's just that next shovel of dirt, and then you're going to hit the seam of gold. We weren't anywhere close to the gold, nowhere close. And we should have exited that project 4 months earlier. And to be honest with you, it took about 7 to 8 months to recoup both the time, the effort, and the money that we sunk into that operation, into that project, to get back to where we needed to be. So from a business point of view, it was pretty costly, both in time, money, and resources, and emotion.
So, like when you think about that in mid-market size businesses or in smaller family-run businesses, to avoid that pain, there's massive risk of business failure, depending on your current cash flow and bank balance. How strong is the position of the business at the time of entering into something like that? What would you say are the best strategies for a small business, mid-market business, to put in place to avoid that pitfall and to make sure that you don't lose your business through a ill-conceived or poorly managed strategy in that space?
So obviously due diligence, do your numbers, which we did, right? So you've got to do your numbers. You've got to set in decision points, right? So what decisions are we going to make at what point? Going good or going bad, right? So going good, you may want to put some more money into it. If it's going bad, when do you get out of it? The other thing that I would say in kind of marketing is look for businesses that's a win-win, right? Marketing companies are now understanding that there should be skin in the game for them. So is it pay for results, for example, right? So there's some form of structure in which, yes, you're putting up some capital, but they're going to get some of the reward at the end, right? So they get a bonus out if the project goes well. So they've got more skin in the game than just you, right? So having a look at that, right? How do you get suppliers? How do you get vendors to have a little bit more skin in the game as well? So if the project goes well, they get a little bit more money out of it versus you're taking all of the risk. And I think that would have been probably something that we should have implemented, where there was some skin in the game for that supplier of that project, in which they got a better bonus out of it rather than us taking on all of the cash, us taking all of the cash risk.
Okay, good advice.
All right, let's talk about sacrificing your why for survival. So, Luke, was there ever a moment when you had to completely sideline your original vision to keep your business afloat?
There have been a few, unfortunately, or fortunately, Andrew, and some of them have led to success, but there are two that stand out for me that very nearly sunk the mothership in the process of chasing a new passion or a new shiny object or a new perceived opportunity in the market. And one that comes to mind is we set up a division as part of a business. We went into the landscaping and outdoor furniture space. We invested heavily from the primary business, rental agreements, new staff training, uniforms, inventory, marketing, websites, you name it, all the things that you have to do when you establish a new division. And it just didn't get the traction. The market research we had done was inadequate, and it was incredibly painful. We got to the 6-month point. We were hundreds and hundreds of thousands in, and we had to terminate staff. We had to exit a lease, fortunately with an understanding landlord, because we were a primary tenant in another property of his. It's not only the humiliation that you feel, but it's also letting down your suppliers, the new agreements you have in place, letting go of staff and their dreams that they had at joining a startup. So it was really, really painful. It was an embarrassing lesson, but I think the thing that we did right was to call it early, to say we've totally misread this market. We've made some glaring errors, and we can hobble along for another year or 2 years, and maybe recoup the initial investment.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, can we focus on it enough without sacrificing another business or cannibalizing sales through loss of time and focus?
Mm-hmm.
Having taken that money out of that business, we couldn't grow the team in that business to fill the holes. It was a real challenge, and yeah, it was a huge loss. But I think that's the difficulty in businesses, knowing when to make that decision to say, okay, your first loss is your best loss.
What was the biggest learning that you got from that you could impart to other business owners?
I think having your metrics in place,
Mm.
Andrew. I think you've got to have your projections and your targets and know what's realistically achievable. You've got to have a worst case scenario plan, and know that every month you're looking at it and you're looking down the road at your cash flow and saying, okay, what have we done? And recognizing when that mistake's been made, to be brave enough to call it and to
Mm-hmm.
stop, to rip the band-aid off, as we say in SA, and take the pain, and refocus. Like you said, you should have pulled the plug, half an hour earlier, 4 months earlier on that marketing mission. We
Yeah.
were the same. In hindsight, we actually knew in month 3. We went into 2 projects, we lost a pile of money, and it was time to go. I think it's that recognition when you see that first sign to really dig into it and to then make a decision and to stand by that decision. Because ultimately, as business owners and business leaders, that's what you pay to do, isn't it? It's to make decisions. So, and that leads me to my question, I suppose. In your corporate experience, how
Mm-hmm.
often did profit motives overshadow core values or personal fulfillment?
All the time. Corporate world versus the small medium business world, the private world is far different. I'd say in the corporate world, it's a lot more cutthroat because you've got to hit your numbers every quarter, right? You're answerable to the shareholders, your customers, and your shareholders. Understanding your numbers, where are you going to be? Everything's about shareholder value, meeting the numbers. If you don't meet the numbers, people get all upset. Your stock price goes down. If you meet your numbers, yay, guess what happens? The target goes up, right? Your expectations, right? Nobody wants to hear a down month or a down quarter or a down year, right? Everybody wants to know, how are you going to do better? And it's that constant do better. I think in the private world, you've got a lot more leverage. You've got a lot more ability to not meet the numbers. Again, I'm not saying not meeting numbers is a good thing, but let's, for example, look at Dell. Dell had a lot of issues with regards to their stock price and where they were going after some big acquisitions. And Michael Dell took the business back private because he needed to do some very big restructuring within the business. He restructured it and then brought it back to the market. Could he have done those things while he was still public? I think the debate is still raging on that one, and I think the majority of people would say no, because of the pressures of the market, the pressures of the stock market wanting you to hit results all the time. Right, so you can see that. Why do stocks go up and down? Right, because I didn't meet the numbers or my outlook. Right, you hear that all the time. Very interesting comment from I think it was WD-40, but they were talking to their senior leadership and they were going, "You're not hitting your numbers, right? Why are you not hitting?" It's like, those are your numbers, not my numbers. I'm developing leadership. I'm developing leaders. Go look at what that business is now. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
They balked against some of the numbers. They told the story of why they're doing it, but they weren't hitting their numbers every quarter. To go back to your point, though, did motive overshadow my core values? Usually no, but there were some things that we had to do that I didn't agree with, right? If you can understand the reasons behind it, you can get behind them. There was nothing that was unethical or anything like that, right? I mean, that would absolutely be just a straight no. But there were things that we had to do within business, that was going to impact people, right? So the biggest challenge I ever had was impacting people, because I knew that there was, not only was it themselves, but their families and the people around it and the community that it was impacting. Was it a necessary evil? Yes, at times it was, right? And it was through no fault of the individual that they were, for a better word, they were on a spreadsheet. Companies, large companies, manage on spreadsheets, which, again, in this day and age is a bit of a challenge, right? But large businesses have to manage on the numbers. What do the numbers tell you? The same with the business. What do the numbers tell you? I will tell you, right? We have absolutely had to make hard decisions. It's based upon the individual, the standards that we've set. Are they meeting the standards of the business? And if they're not meeting the standards of the business, what action do you take to get them back on track? Right? Because at the end of the day, everybody in the organization needs to be adding value to the organization. And as adding value to the organization, the bottom line is, are they creating revenue or are they saving money? That's
Mm.
what a team member needs to be doing. They've got to be
Yeah.
creating revenue or saving money. Even if you're in customer service, how do you keep your customers keep coming back and buying more? How do you keep them happy? So you're creating revenue, right? Customer support is seen as a cost center. It's not. It's a revenue center. We've actually turned cost centers into revenue centers, right? Customer support, call centers, revenue center, right? Done it in the past a million times, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that, right? So when you look at your organization, is it making revenue or saving money, right? Are you setting the standards? Are you setting the goals? Does everybody understand it? Does everybody get behind it? And if they're not, how do you help them? I've been fortunate. I don't think I've ever had to go against who I am, but I do know people that have had to do that, and it sucks. It sucks you emotionally, physically, mentally, financially. I mean, all the suckiness that's out there, it does that to you.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the navigating the tightrope between passion and profit. And we were just talking about that. So, Luke, how do you balance your passion with the pragmatic need for profit in your business decisions?
Yeah, I think that's become easier with experience, to be honest, Andrew. I mean, and not only in my own business experience, but in experiencing business vicariously through clients, friends, and seeing where a business is successful. And that became a passion of mine, was to look at businesses and say, okay, well, why is that business in this sector successful? And the marketplace is showing all of them to be unsuccessful. And what I've really come to understand is, I mean, there are three key drivers: team, time, and money. But I think the most powerful of one, and you've touched on it now, is team. You know, when I look at the businesses I've owned and sold successfully, they've had great teams. The businesses that weren't successful had weak teams. And that was my luck in the good teams in
Right.
my inexperienced days, and my fault with bad teams. I think some of the best advice I've received recently is, if you're not learning something from a candidate in an interview, then you shouldn't hire them. And, you know, when I look at teams today and I see powerful teams, and that is a real passion for me, if they aligned to the purpose and the goal of the business, and they understand the profits, and the profits are realistic, you're not taking advantage of the market, then it's so easy. The profits come because your team's aligned. They're a good team. They know how to communicate. And as a team, they work together. They work together to drive the systems in the business and get you the results you need in the business, Andrew. And they work together to look after your customers or your clients. So when you have that, the profits can only flow from there, you know, because your systems are right and your metrics are right, and your team knows what they're measuring. So they know if they're hitting their metrics, then money's being made at the end of the day. So I think that's been my greatest learning, is to say, okay, like, I can walk into an organization today and I can tell you, with the team that's around, whether that business is hitting their numbers and, you know, whether they're going to be around in a few years' time, easily. Just by talking to the owner, 9 times out of 10, you'll get that sentiment, or the CEO, the MD. And when you fix your team, I can tell you, you're going to fix your profits. So that's probably been my greatest takeaway. We meet business owners, you and I both, MDs who don't feel like going into the office. And when you dig down into that, and what's the why, is he's got team issues. He doesn't want to interact with people. And as an owner or an MD, there's no ways you're going to hit your numbers in that environment. Never. It can't happen. So I would say that's your first fix. That'll help fix money. And, if you haven't got a great team, you haven't got time. So if you don't have time, you're not going to build a great team. Those two just work that way. So I hope that answers that question. It makes me think a little bit, like for you looking back, what would you have done differently in your corporate roles to better align with your personal why? If we could plant Andrew back 10 or 15 or 20 years, how would that look?
I gotta say, I was extremely fortunate in my corporate life. Many of the jobs that I had, and I didn't understand this, by the way. I mean, I only figured out my why at the age of 53, about 2 years ago. So my why is better way. How I do that is by the right way, processes and procedures, but what I deliver is value. Most of the roles that I had were doing things a better way. I had a great team around me. I had great leaders around me. I think understood who I was better than I did. I followed a great leader through a number of different parts of the organization. And he knew my strengths and he also knew my weaknesses. I remember a conversation I had with him for a role in the company. And I wanted it. I wanted to do it. And I did the interview. We always had to interview. And at the end of the session, he brought me back for feedback and he told me, and these were his words, "On your best day, you couldn't do this job." I was like, wow.
Tough reality to hear.
On your best day, you couldn't do this job. And I'm like, wow, that was hard to hear. That was really hard to hear.
Yeah.
And you know what? He was right. He brought somebody else in, another manager. It was a very, very heavily financial role. He brought in another leader and who I ended up reporting to. And she was absolutely fantastic. I loved working with her. And I learned a lot from her. So working with her allowed me to learn to get into the next role, which I, just killed afterwards. And I think as I went through and I progressed, right, people understood what I was really good at. The challenge came at the very end, when you're getting to that upper echelons in organizations. Because I was working so many hours and I was head down, I never thought of me. I never thought of what I needed to do. My mindset was, I need to accomplish the goals and the tasks, right? I needed to do things better, right? And if I do this, then I'll be looked after. That wasn't the case at the end. And to be perfectly frank, I wasn't around the same leaders that I was previously. And I was asked questions like, so what do you want to do next? The old HR question, well, it's your career. What would you like to do next? And my response to that was, I have no idea. I'm heads down doing all of this work and getting and hitting the targets and the goals, right? Influencing everybody and having no power. It was a pure influencing role, which is really not aligned to my why, right? And I got completely lost, unfulfilled, didn't know where I was going. And I got to the end where it was like, no, it's your career. You need to do this. You need to figure this out. And I didn't know. I didn't know where to go. And I ended up and I retired. I took the early retirement package.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I look back, it was my failing because I didn't know who I was. It was my failing because I couldn't communicate it.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, those are very vulnerable truths. I think in so many corporate roles, Andrew, the higher you get up the ladder, the more oxygen deprived it is and the more lonely it is. And showing vulnerability is actually unsafe because you're seen as weak. So I mean, as coaches, and you've been in those very senior roles with multinational companies,
Mm-hmm.
how does coaching help? I mean, if we were talking to CEOs today, what would you be saying to CEOs, MDs, future leaders, and not necessarily that, even entrepreneurs who are running, because once you've got more than 12 staff, you've lost control of your team,
Right.
So where does a coach add value and allow that vulnerability so that you can grow or survive those pitfalls that lead to business failure?
I think the first thing is having a trusted mentor, right? So
Is
having a
that the
mentor,
same as a coach?
yeah, it's the same as a coach, right? A mentor, a coach, right? Having somebody that's around you that you can be vulnerable with, right? CEO roles and senior leadership roles are very, very lonely places, right? In those roles, a lot of people have got to have the answer, right?
Yeah.
I have to, I'm an SVP, I have to have the answer. Everybody's looking at me, right? Everybody thinks I have to have the answer. Bullshit. You don't. You don't have to have the answer. And by the way, it's okay to say, I don't know. So losing egos is the first thing that we've got to work on, right? Second of all is getting a great team around you, right? I was going through this conversation with individuals yesterday. I stole this from Simon Sinek. You know, I'm a great Simon Sinek fan. But we were looking at where do leaders stand in this diamond, in a diamond, right? Do you lead
Mm-hmm.
from the front? Do you lead from the back? Do you lead from the sides? Do you lead from the middle? Where are you? Where are you on the journey? By the way, you've got to stand in any one of those dots
I
at
was going
any
to say,
point all day,
yeah.
right? So be intentional. Where do you want to be intentionally leading from? Do you sit in a meeting and lead from the front and everybody, you just talk? Well, you're just being a dictator at that point, right? Even
Yeah.
if you're sat at the back and all you're doing is listening, but somebody comes up with a comment and you start nodding your head, well, guess what? You're just telling people that's what you want, right? Or shaking your head. You're telling people that's not what you want, right? So it's about making sure that from an executive leadership, having a mentor, having a coach, working on the one thing that you've probably got to work on that quarter. Just one
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
right? Is it communication, right? Leadership is all about communicating. So if you don't know your team, how can you inspire them? If you don't know
And
what motivates them,
yeah.
how can you inspire them?
Yeah.
So
100%.
I would say you've got to know your team at their core, right? And this is why the YOS is so powerful and why I'm such a big fan of it. And I literally wish I had this 20 years ago. I truly do. My job as a
Imagine the team you
leader,
would have built.
dude, it would have been stellar. I mean, I had great teams. I got to tell you, I had really great teams. And I had the couple of the eggs here that, the right
But
eggs. But if
but
we
those are the
had,
square pegs we as leaders put in try and fit into a round hole. Nine
I,
times out of 10, isn't it? It's the
well,
leadership who are at fault. Seldom the individual.
Well, unfortunately, some of these people that I acquired when I took over teams, right? I inherited the ugly ducklings, right? And my job was to move them into the right role or
Correct.
move them out. That
Yeah.
was the choice.
And with
So,
disc and wide would have been so much easier.
oh, so much easier, far easier. Because again, we used to sit down in rooms every quarter, every year, do a 9-point grid. Who needed to promote it, who had the ability to promote it, who was exhibiting leadership skills, right? You had the 90% of people that were in the middle, that were just great employees, were great at the job, but then the level 7, 8, 9, right? Who were in the wrong job and who was getting fired,
Yeah.
right? Who
Yeah.
was just a waste of space, right?
Yeah.
But we would go through that every time, and the hours we would spend in there, and my thing was justify it. So my leaders, I mean, I'd had hundreds of people, right? But my leaders would have to come in and justify it because I was trying to remove bias, right? So the bias of individuals, how do you move that bias? Tell me the reasons, show me the data, understand what were the goals? What were the goals that were set? Why didn't they meet those goals, right? These were hard conversations to have. And we
Yeah.
spent hours doing it and we were pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I'm still pretty passionate about it, as you can probably hear, but I always took it on me and I always took it on the leaders that it was our job to get the right people in the right place to do the right thing or move them on for their benefit at the end of the day, because
Yeah.
they were always miserable. I don't know how many people that we moved on said thank you. I practiced disc for 25 years, right? I've used disc all over the world for 25 years. We've
Yeah.
taught it. I got great stories about discs. But anyway, balloons in the office with the DISs and Cs we had to go around and pop because everybody was looking for the S person to give all the work to. Anyway, but if I had the why and I understood what people's why, what their purpose was and how they did it and why they did it and what they were delivering, I could put the right people in the right seat in about 20 minutes. I could have had them executing far beyond what they executed at that moment in time. So understanding that would have been a massive advantage to me as a business owner and as a leader, right?
Yeah.
And going back to your other point, then I could have had the right people around me. But mentors and coaches for executives are a must because they're going to challenge you. They're going to challenge your thought process. They're going to ask you questions that nobody below you will ask you.
Yeah.
Nobody, right? By the way, the other thing, when you're a leader, the biggest thing you've got to be asking is, or being exhibiting is, I don't know the answers. I don't know. And being vulnerable to say, I don't know. Let's find out together. Let's understand this together. You don't have to know all the answers. You don't. But
Exactly,
be open.
Andrew. And I think that's the thing, and in wrapping up, I would say that's the real entrepreneur's or C-suite journey, isn't it? It's having a good team around you, having your metrics that you can measure, your dashboard that you work on so that you can pick up trends quickly and that you can make decisions, because that is business. Like you said at the very beginning, one in 15 will, on average, will sell successfully. The balance are probably going to close. Great to be online and chatting to you today.